The Sky This Month with your host, Dave McDonald.
Welcome to The Sky This Month. I'm your host, Dave McDonald, and this is January 2025. Happy New Year, everybody. Boy, do we have a show for you. We have two, not one, but two occultations taking place this month. We have a planetary alignment taking place this month. We have a new president and vice president. I'm going to have an interview in just a little bit. It's an exciting month. So what you can see behind me, this is what we call the Pleiades, and it's a star cluster. I'll show you where it is in just a little bit. Sometimes it's referred to as the Seven Sisters. We can count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Usually we only get to see 6 of the 7 due to air pollution and light pollution. So one of the things that is happening January 9th, the evening of January 9th, is our first occultation of the month. So let's take a peek at what that is all about. So this next slide shows you where do we find the Pleiades. So we're looking up and we can see the constellation of Orion, of course. Very easy to find up in the sky, and this is Orion's belt. And if you take Orion's belt and you move upwards, you come to Aldebaran, which is the eye of the bull. But I don't need to tell you where the moon is. The moon is right there. This particular shot I'm going to show you is 7:30, January 9th. Okay? This event, this occultation event, which basically means one celestial object is moving in front of another celestial object. And here we have the moon moving in front of the Pleiades. And this is going to be an all-night event. Starting around 6 o'clock is when the first approach of the moon, it'll be the dark edge of the moon will be approaching the Pleiades. And the nice thing about that is you'll see stars from the Pleiades start to slide behind that dark edge of the moon. And it's going to take in the vicinity of 6 hours for the moon to slide all the way across the Pleiades. So let's look at the next slide. We're going to zoom in a little bit. And what you see here is the moon moving in front of the Pleiades. And as I said, this is about a 7:30-ish snapshot of what's going on. But from 6 o'clock till around midnight, the moon is going to be slowly moving from west to east, because remember that is how the moon moves across the sky in relationship to the stars, is from west to east. So the moon will start as we look at the Pleiades on the right side, and it will be making its way towards the left side of the Pleiades and exit the Pleiades somewhere in the vicinity of midnight. So it's probably not an event you want to spend all night looking at, but check in on it every once in a while. But this is only happening on January 9th, the evening of January 9th. Binoculars will be a treat because the moon is not full, but it's a very bulging, bright, waxing gibbous moon. So it's pretty bright, and the Pleiades are relatively small and dim-ish compared to the moon. So binoculars will be a big help, a telescope even better. That's January 9th. The second occultation that we have taking place is going to be on January 13th. Let's take a peek at that. So, familiar Orion. We used Orion to point to where you could find the Pleiades and the moon, which is no trouble finding the moon, right? So now, if you look at where Orion is here, and this is January 13th, and we're looking at a little before 9 o'clock or so at night, and you see Orion. And if you took Rigel, the bottom right, as we look at Orion, and you go through Betelgeuse, the upper left, as we look at Orion, then you end up pretty close to the moon. But you can't miss the moon. The important thing is this occultation is going to be the moon and Mars. And you see, again, around 9 o'clock is when the event is going to start. You can see the moon and Mars really close together. Once again, binoculars will be a help because the moon is so bright and Mars is plenty bright. It's a magnitude -1.2, but compared to the moon, it's no contest, right? But let's zoom in and check out the next slide, and you can see what this is going to look like a little bit into after 9 o'clock. You can see the moon is sliding in front of Mars. This is a rare event happening. The moon slides in front of the Pleiades. Every once in a while, the Pleiades is relatively large compared to the size of Mars. And so this event is going to be a little more than an hour or so when the moon is going to slide over Mars, and Mars is going to disappear. And then as you watch it, in an hour 15 or so, you're going to see Mars reappear. I'm not going to spoil it. I don't have a slide for that. This is for you to go out and enjoy the evening of January 13th around 9 o'clock-ish. Start before 9 o'clock so you don't miss the fact of the moon moving in front of the planet Mars. Great opportunity. And Mars is at a position we call opposition this month, right around the 13th also, which means it's in its most favorable position to look at Mars. So this is a great month for Mars in any case, a great month to look at Mars through the telescope. And we're going to share a little bit about some telescope opportunities in an interview I have coming up in just a few minutes. So the occultation of Mars by the moon, don't miss it. Then we have a planetary alignment coming up. So let's talk a little bit about this planetary alignment. And this planetary alignment is officially called a conjunction. A conjunction is when two planetary bodies, two celestial bodies, line up. From our point of view, they line up, or they get in a close circle within 4 degrees or so of each other. In this case, it's going to be roughly 2.5 degrees apart, about 5 full moon widths apart. But there's going to be this alignment or conjunction of Saturn and Venus. And this is going to be taking place around January 17th, an hour or so after sunset. So you have some time. It's not going to be just for a few minutes and gone. But when the sky starts to get dark, 45 minutes or so after the sun sets, you'll find Venus and Saturn not as bright, but very close by. And there's not going to be an occultation, but there's going to be what we call a conjunction where they get very close to each other. Now, of course, if it's cloudy on January 9th, there's nothing we can do about the occultation of the Pleiades. If it's cloudy on January 13th, there's nothing we can do about the occultation of Mars. But the good news is for the alignment or this conjunction, January 17th, you know, if it's clear on the 16th, I'd go have a look. If it's clear on the 18th, I'd go have a look. There's a little bit of a window. 17th is officially the closest. The 18th is the next closest. But the 16th or 19th, hopefully one of those 4 days will be clear enough for you to have a look at this planetary alignment with Saturn and Venus. So let's just review on this occultation. It's when one celestial body passes in front of another. A conjunction is an alignment of celestial objects, or when they appear to be within 4 degrees of each other, we call that a conjunction. And then just to review again for the dates, the occultation of the Pleiades by the moon, January 9th, 7:30. You can start around 6 and it's going to go until around midnight, but 7:30 is kind of in the midst of it happening. The occultation of Mars by the moon, January 13th, around 9. You may want to start looking a little before 9, and that's going to take maybe a little more than an hour for that to complete. Don't miss that. And then we have the conjunction of Saturn and Venus, and that is January 16th to 19th after sunset. Again, January 17th to 18th are the sweet spots, but somewhere in those 4 days. Okay? Don't miss it. In the morning sky, Mercury makes an appearance, but Mercury is very close to the horizon, and this is January 5th, and this is maybe 45 minutes or so before sunrise This is happening in the east. Mercury very close to the horizon where it usually is. It's in the lightness of the twilight of the sky. Binoculars, again, will be a help. But if you're looking for Mercury and you haven't found it yet, this is your opportunity to find Mercury January 5th or 6th or 7th. As the days go by, Mercury gets closer to the horizon. Or if you want it at the same altitude above the horizon, the sky gets brighter. So January 5th, 6th is your sweet spot for that. So that's what's happening in the night sky for January. Hope that you get out to enjoy those events. Next, I want to introduce you the Vice President. Now, we're not talking politics of America. We're talking about the New Hampshire Astronomical Society, and I have the great opportunity to interview our Vice President, Mike Atkinson, and so I'm going to introduce him to you and enjoy this interview. Well, as promised, I have a Vice President with me. Now, we talked about a new President and Vice President, but we're not really talking national politics here. We're talking the New Hampshire Astronomical Society, and with me right now is our newly elected Vice President, Michael Atkinson. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, Dave. Nice to be here.
And I hope you say that after the show.
Okay.
So, the New Hampshire Astronomical Society, in my view, is so much more important than being President or Vice President of the United States. I mean, those guys just look after a chunk of land in the United States, whereas the New Hampshire Astronomical Society looks after the universe and bringing the universe to the public at large. So, in a nutshell, in your own words, what is like the mission of the New Hampshire Astronomical Society?
So NHAS is a state-chartered nonprofit educational society here in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Our mission is to share the excitement of the sky with citizens and residents in all the different ways that we can to help people find what excites them. You know, what is the thing about the sky that hooks them? And that's what we're about.
Well, and that's, you know, really neat, because it's nice to get interested in something that kind of sparks questions in your mind and you want to know and learn more about it. And so what are some of the vehicles, some of the ways in which the NHAS, we'll call it, the New Hampshire Astronomical Society, what are some of the vehicles that NHAS uses to connect with the public at large, to bring them in, to help them to find out what more detail they might be interested in?
Probably the most visible thing that we do are public skywatch events. Mm-hmm. So that's a event that will take place usually at night, but not exclusively, where one or more amateur astronomers will show up at a location with telescopes. And a lot of times folks have never looked at the sky through a telescope or a pair of binoculars.
Right.
And so we'll set up the viewing instruments and help folks see things that they've maybe seen in magazines, maybe they've seen on television, but there's something that is viscerally different when they put their eye up against an eyepiece or hold a binocular against their face. And when they see something that they know is out there for the first time with their own eyes and not a picture, a lot of times there is vocal exclamation. It's a, oh my, oh wow.
And what object would you say would be one of the top that would get that kind of an exclamation?
At this point in time, Jupiter is amazing.
Okay.
Jupiter right now is relatively close to Earth, and so it appears pretty big in the eyepiece. And there are 4 moons that are easily visible with even a low-powered instrument, the Galilean moons. And when people look at Jupiter and see those, it is really fascinating to watch them understand that those are moons around a different planet.
Yes, and that's actually, and that conclusion actually was one of the few things that got Galileo in trouble.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
And that's pretty neat. And another one that comes to my mind, that, as you said, Jupiter is high in the sky, we're close, it's big, it's bright, it's the fourth brightest object in the sky altogether. We have the sun, the moon when it's out, and Venus, and then number 4 is Jupiter.
That's correct.
And it's out there like right now during the whole month of January. And one that is starting to fade, I shouldn't say fade, but to set, is Saturn. Right? Saturn always seems to get a nice response.
It does. And what is interesting with Saturn, at this point especially, is that right, it's the jewel of the solar system with the rings.
Yes.
But many people don't realize that the ring changes perspective over time.
Yep.
And I believe it's in late March this year.
Yep.
The rings are going to be as flat onto us from Earth as they will be. Mm-hmm. And then after the end of March, they will start to open back up. They will, from our perspective, it will tilt and we'll see more and more of the rings.
And we'll see, for the first time in 14 years, we'll be looking at the bottom, so to speak, the bottom side of the rings.
Right, as we go around, the planets shift up and down, the rings shifts up
Yep.
and down. It takes, I think, 28 to 29 years for Saturn to complete 1 year. And so as we view that, the rings make a rotation every 14 years,
Yep.
the complete top to bottom.
Yep. And I remember my first time looking at Saturn in a telescope, and the same response I get from others when I am having a telescope at a sky watch is, did somebody paint that on the end of the
Exactly.
on the end of the telescope? Because people find it hard to believe that's really Saturn.
It is, and right now, with the rings being almost edge on, it's just a thin line for the rings, but it's completely visible, and it will be visible through the entire time that we can see the planet while it's nighttime. And then another thing that is of interest when looking at Saturn is the moon Titan. Mm-hmm. It's a very big and bright moon, and we can see that with even a moderately powered telescope when we look out at Saturn.
Now, where do these sky watches, of which and that sounds very interesting, and I certainly encourage people to attend a sky watch, but where do the sky watches appear, and how can people find out where to go to a sky watch?
Sky watches are held by request at the institution requesting it. So sometimes it's a school, sometimes it's a library, sometimes it's a civic organization, such as the Scouts. Scouting organizations will request that. But really, anybody who is interested in hosting a sky watch can contact the Astronomical Society through our webpage, plugnhastro.com, and go to the calendar and see what is listed. As a general rule, we'll handle 2 sky watches per week at various parts of the state, so they take place all around. And as I said, we will usually have several astronomers show up with various instruments to look at the night sky.
And that also, in addition to enjoying and learning about some objects that are in the night sky, is an opportunity for people to learn about telescopes and the various types of telescopes.
Right. Yep. Or even, the sky's been there all along. The sky's always been up there.
Yeah.
And there are things in the sky that we can look at with just our eyes that have been around for thousands and thousands of years that you don't need a telescope or a set of binoculars to look at. We live in an age where the television is on at night, or the internet is open at night.
And back in the day, thousands of years ago, they had to watch TV by candlelight.
And the stars have been there all along.
Yep.
And our history with the stars has been there all along. And the things that we see in the sky, the names of the various objects, you know, some of those are 3, 4, 5,000 years old that we've been bringing them forward. So it is not just being able to see the planet Jupiter or the planet Saturn, but to see the stars and to observe how they behave in the sky.
Yep.
Is also something that we will do. You know, we'll do what is called a laser pointer sky tour.
Sure.
Where we're using our naked eye to look at the stars as they are and how they've been looked at for thousands of years.
Yep. And these laser pointers of which you speak they're more like, I refer to them sometimes as lightsabers, because they're not like your normal classroom red laser dot.
Right. And they're useful because they can make sure that we're all looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, generally you don't want to be out in the dark sky pointing lasers at things because they can be distracting.
Yep.
There's power limits that are requirements for use. You can't have too much power with them. But they're available, and we can point out whether it's a constellation or some of the other things that we can see with our eye, nebulas and galaxies and things like that.
One thing that I like to point out is that's readily available and visible, discernible, that very few people actually know about is like the middle star of the handle of the Big Dipper, a double star. And you point that out and they're like, oh, I never noticed that.
It is interesting, I think, that we don't see until we look.
That's right.
And we know to look. One of the favorite stories of mine, at this time of year, the constellation Perseus the hero from Greek mythology is high in the sky.
Yeah.
And one of the stars in that particular constellation is Algol, the demon's head. And that star, every 3 days or so, changes how bright it is in the sky. It changes noticeably. For thousands of years, people have been watching this star and watch it get dimmer. And then 8 hours later, it comes back to the same brightness. We don't see that today because we don't go out and look at it every night.
Yep.
But looking at it every night, if we went out and paid attention, we would see that that star is changing how bright it is. Much like, oh, there's actually 2 stars there. Those types of things I find fascinating and very exciting to share with the public.
Yes. And so you mentioned the website, and what was the website again that people can go to?
www.nhastro.com.
nhastro.com. And there's a calendar there where
there
people
is.
can do. And there's a place where typically every month there's a sky watch. Do you know where that place is?
So we have several that go on regularly. The first Friday at the McAuliffe Shepherd Discovery Center.
Yeah.
So that will be this Friday. We'll be out there. We also do the first Saturday. We'll often have a group in downtown Portsmouth.
Yeah.
And also during the month, we have something going up in Waterville Valley regularly.
Right.
That's also, those are regular scheduled. They are, of course, mostly dependent on weather. We can look at clouds, but that's not as exciting as looking at the stars. And then throughout the month, we'll have a number of other open sessions that are available to the public. And the more the merrier. Please come and take a look.
And that's great information. And I might highlight the first Friday every month, the first Friday at the McAuliffe Shepherd Discovery Center in Concord, New Hampshire, that there's a sky watch for outdoor observing if the weather permits such. And again, another reason to come there or any sky watch is to enjoy looking at the sky, to look at things that you've kind of seen or know about, but you haven't really observed, you haven't really taken the time to appreciate the amazement that is there, and also to learn about telescopes. And maybe you have a telescope and you don't know how to use it. You can bring it with you, and we'd be happy to help you out in understanding how to use it. Or maybe you're just asking questions because you think, maybe I would like to buy a telescope. What should I get? How much should I spend? So those types of questions can be answered as well. So as one who works part-time at the Discovery Center, I would encourage you to consider coming on the first Friday night of every month at the McCall Shepherd Discovery Center in Concord, New Hampshire. But do watch the website, as Mike has shared, at NH, why don't you tell us
Astro, nhastro.com. And we have a calendar there that lists all of our open sky watches.
Now-
And they usually take place at night, Dave.
Okay. And that's a good thing. But every once in a while, there's like a solar viewing, because the sun has been pretty active, and we've got to enjoy some aurora, and the sun's been pretty active. So sometimes we have, what do we call them, day watches?
That's right.
And to look at the sun, which is fascinating as well.
In astronomy, rule number 1, don't look at the sun.
Right.
Don't look at the sun unless you've got the right equipment, and then come to a sky watch or a day watch and
Yeah.
check it out.
And so this is the New Hampshire Astronomical Society, of which you're vice president, and we're talking about. So it sounds like it's something that you could become a member of.
Absolutely. Memberships is certainly available. It's a minimal fee. With that, you get to partake in all of our events. You get access to some of our dark sky sites. And we do not just visual observing that we've been talking about, but we have a group that does photography in the dark.
They call that astrophotography.
Taking pictures in the dark. That's kind of an interesting thing. Radio astronomy, and there's a number of other areas that you can get involved in if you're at all curious in that. And if that's what excites you, then come on down. We also have a special rate for students, so students can...
Yeah, good point. Yeah, student rate. And so as a society with members, are there regular meetings?
We have meetings on the internet, and we have in-person meetings through the course of the year, about once a month. With those, we try and bring in speakers of various types and sizes from various places to learn more about the sky and see different aspects of what astronomy is all about. Yeah.
Well, that's neat. And so the meetings, whether they be online or in person, are typically when?
I believe we're the second Friday of the month.
Yeah.
So the calendar will soon be posted for that, I think, but usually it's the second Friday. We'll have either an in-person meeting, often in Concord, sometimes elsewhere. And then the web meetings, of course, are available wherever anyone is. You just open your computer.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the first one coming up would be January 10th, Friday, January 10th, which I understand is going to be an online meeting.
Correct.
And so go to nhastro.com and find out how to become a member. And people can join the meeting without being a member, true?
Absolutely. Come to the meetings online, come to the meeting in person, sit in with us and find out if it's something that excites you. And if it does, and you want to become a member, we'd love to have you.
And that's awesome. What a great way to end this part of the conversation. You are welcome to come to the New Hampshire Astronomical Society. Check it out. Check it out at a skywatch, look through a telescope, have a conversation, enjoy a star tour, check out telescopes that you may possibly be interested in buying. Check out your own telescope and maybe figure out how to use it. Come online and enjoy the camaraderie of people with like-mindedness on a meeting. Maybe you would like to become a member for a and it is a very modest, reasonable fee. I can vouch for that. And so, Mike, thanks so much for being part of our show today.
My pleasure, Dave.
Thanks for coming. And again, nhastro.com. So there's some neat things you can see in the sky. There's a great interview with our Vice President, Mike Atkinson. I hope that you will have the opportunity to attend a Skywatch, to get to the membership, to look at the webpage, NewHampshireNHastro.com. Also visit the McAuliffe Shepard Discovery Center webpage, StarHop, StarHop.com. All kinds of great things are at your fingertips for this month of January. I'm Dave McDonald for The Sky This Month.